Hey everyone, welcome back to Living Electric. Alex, I have a very honest question for you.
Yes. What is
Do
that?
you like money?
Yes, of course.
And this is not, we're not talking about a sponsor here. We're talking about the cost of ownership in terms of charging your electric
Yes.
vehicle. Do you like to save
Yes.
money?
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. Good. Well, we're not, this is not a financial, podcast or anything like that. I just, that it's a hot topic when it comes to electric vehicle car ownership, or electric vehicle ownership is the cost of charging. There's a
Yes.
lot of unknown factors. A lot of people ask us either through YouTube or social media. And for today's episode, we are going to get into conversations about how much it costs for us to charge our EVs, as well as what you might find in the public and from an industry standpoint with Alex's background.
Definitely. Definitely. But before we get into that,
Yeah.
we left the last episode on a cliffhanger, so we got to hear an update here on
Yes.
car
Yeah.
shopping.
So we bought nothing. We decided not to buy anything. And the reason is because we actually, well, okay, I know we cut it off, but basically the car that we were going to order was I think it was a 2017 smart car, a smart for two electric drive. It's a mouthful. And we went down to a dealership that was about 50 minutes away. We drove 50 minutes to go drive one, and we got in it and we punched it. We're like, this is not it. It's not it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just blows my mind that car was $30,000 brand new, and it felt like a 12,000.
Seriously.
Yes, yeah,
Wow.
only because it was made by Mercedes, so like a
Wow.
lot of people think it's like a luxury car,
Gotcha.
and it had less than 8,000 miles on it, and like pieces of plastic are already breaking off, like the roof
Wow.
liner was damaged, like yeah,
I think
it
it's
just
five-year-old car too.
I
So,
know, I
jeez.
know. Yeah, so we decided to skip that, buy a bathroom renovation instead. So invest in our house,
There you
and
go.
eventually we're probably going to get electric motorcycles. The Land District that's still on our list.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. Yeah,
yeah,
that'd be a nice little zipping around town
yeah,
vehicle
yeah.
as a
Because
second one.
we can buy two of them for the price of that EV.
That's a good
So
point. Yeah.
yeah,
Nice.
so sorry to
Okay.
keep everybody waiting for that answer, but a little
It's tough,
anticlimactic.
I mean, it's tough too, especially in this day and age when it's so easy to like buy a car online, which I think is what you did, right? You ordered it through Carvana or something.
Yeah, and that was
Um,
the thing. The interest rate was like 11% for the
seriously,
yeah, if we finance through
that
Carvana.
seems absurd.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the tough part because it is so easy to buy stuff online. Like that's what I did with my Model 3. I bought it online. I did take a test drive before I ordered it though, just to make sure like I wasn't completely like making a bad purchase by buying this
Yeah.
car and then I get in and I'm like, this is awful. So
Yeah.
that's smart that you actually like went and did a test drive to see how you
Yeah.
liked it before you got into all that. So
Yeah. Yeah. The thing with Carvana is that like if you do order a car, you do have 7 days to test it out. And I think you have like 1,300 miles, which is actually a lot of driving.
it's a decent amount. Yeah.
Yeah. So like if you don't
Nice.
like it, you could bring it back, but they still check your credit score. It could be a ding on your, credit, and
Yeah.
yeah, just not worth it.
Interesting.
Yeah. At least
Yeah.
for the
So
smart car.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're actually give a car shopping update for me.
Yes. I
We
want to hear
took
this.
we took Mallory's car to the shop and got some bad news.
Oh no.
So it's an older car. It's like a 2006, I think, GMC Envoy. So big SUV. It was her parents' car. It's like still in their name. She just drives it like when we needed a second car.
Yeah.
But she takes my car to work now. Like that car is kind of the GMC's kind of fallen in disrepair. And we brought it in because it was having issues turning. Like the power steering, like would work for a few days when we refilled the fluid, and then it'd be shot like
Oh,
within a few days. Like something was leaking or not right with that.
oh no.
And also the ABS sensor, when you would go to brake, would freak out and think that you were slipping on like completely dry pavement, so it would start like vibrating, like
Oh
it was
no.
trying to like adjust the brakes or whatever. Um,
That would freak me out.
yeah, and it did that every time you braked. So,
Jeez.
little concerning. So we brought it in to get those couple things checked out. The transmissions had issues too, but we never really have done anything about that. So we just kind of brought it in for the general inspection. She brought it over there around lunchtime, and then she calls me around 4 o'clock, and she's like, "Okay, here's what they said. they called me and they're like, they started off with, "We're very sorry, but here's
Oh
everything.
no.
Here's basically everything that's wrong with it, and this vehicle is like probably not safe to keep driving, like with everything wrong with it." So there were a bunch of issues with the suspension, the control arms, like all this crap that like just really needs fixed in the car. But they're like, just to get it up and running and like safe to drive is going to be around like $6,000, and then to like get it completely good would probably be another like 2 or 3 thousand on top of that. So we're like, that's not worth it on a 16-year-old car. So
Nope.
like we're kind of weighing our options now to figure out what we're gonna do. Because like even today, like it would have been nice to have two cars. Because like I went to the gym and Mallory went to go shopping, and
Yeah.
and anytime we go two separate ways, like you kind of need two cars.
Yeah.
So we've thought about a lot of different things. I've kind of been running through it in my head. Do we just get like a cheap EV for me to drive while she's at work, or vice versa? Like if one of us needs to drive longer distance, or do we just get like an e-bike for the summer if I need to like ride down to the gym and do that, and just kind of pay a little bit right now? But I don't know. We've got some thinking to do
Yeah.
for a new vehicle.
I would definitely say so. Well, there's a smart car available if you want
That's what I heard.
it. Yes. I
One
think
just
you'd fit
opened
in
up.
it. Yeah, right? Yeah. I think you would fit in it, actually.
I
I
don't
was kind
know.
of surprised.
I've never been
But
in a smart car, so
yeah, well, yeah, you'd be surprised at how much room they have. It's felt like this weird bubble. But I
interesting.
gotta say, no phone call starts off. It's a good phone call when it starts off like that. Like,
Right. We're
yeah,
sorry, but
but
yeah,
it's either a breakup or you're about to
yeah.
get really bad news, which is yeah, I guess a breakup
Neither
is
are
bad
good.
news depending.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, they literally said afterwards, they're like, if you are going to drive it home, like be super careful. Like we would recommend towing it back to wherever you're bringing it.
oh
So we're
my
like, we
god.
don't really want to pay for a tow truck, and we drove it here. So we're like, we'll just be super careful.
Oh, no. So what
um,
about the lightning? Are you guys still thinking of holding out for that?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is like that's where it's probably another year before we can get that realistically, unless we find a dealer that like somebody's canceled their reservation, or like we swoop one up secondhand somehow, that a dealer is trying to get rid of. But still, like that's a pretty expensive car, and we're looking to buy a house right now, and we're
Yeah,
also gonna pay
yeah,
for a wedding next year. So a lot
yeah,
of a lot of big expenses coming to our relationship. So we're trying to just be smart about things. And I think realistically, we'll probably go with something cheaper in the short term, because we drive my car 90% of the time anyway.
yeah,
We really only need two cars if we're both in town and one of us is driving not even across town to go somewhere else.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
um, I've been looking at like Nissan Leafs and like some cheaper secondhand EVs. Like 100-mile range will be more than enough for what we need.
yeah,
So that's kind of the route I've been kind of leaning towards, but we'll see. I mean, it's she would be driving it too, so decision we
yeah.
both got to make.
Yeah. I mean, the good news is that there is a lot of affordable secondhand EVs out there.
Yeah,
And, if you get them from a place like CarMax, or Carvana, like you can get those extended warranties on it. But I will give you guys a heads up, and especially you, Alex, since you're car shopping, we found out that the warranties or the extended warranties that they offer don't cover the battery pack. Most of it's just like the
really.
drive unit and stuff like that. So, like, if it's an older vehicle, you have to rely on the manufacturer warranty for the battery. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep. So just a heads up there because the cars we were looking at, they were expiring in 1 to 2 years. Like,
Right. Yeah, they're hitting
yeah.
that 8-year mark, so it's like they're gonna
Yep.
need some kind of support after that.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely good to keep in mind as you're car shopping.
Definitely, definitely. Cool. You want to get into some charging costs? I know it's a
Yes.
hot
Yep.
topic right now with how expensive gas has been.
Yep.
I know a lot of people have been looking like, oh yeah, like if I was gonna buy a new car, I'm gonna be spending this much anyway. Might as well look at an EV and save some money on fuel. So,
Yep.
um, yeah, you want me to go first, or you want to go
Well,
first with some?
it, I'm just curious because like
Okay.
I want to start off with a misconception a lot of people have with this is
Okay.
that when you get an electric vehicle, the most common misconception I think I've personally heard is that your electricity bill is going to just go through the roof. Like it's going to
Yeah.
be hundreds of dollars every month. And case in point, that's not true at all. So
Yeah.
I kind of want to pitch this question to you. Have you when you first got your Tesla and you started charging and everything, I know that you just recently started charging at your apartment in your garage. Did you notice your electricity bill go through the roof?
So here's the thing. The garage I park in, it's rented and it's separate from my apartment. And it also is on a separate meter. So
Oh,
I do not even pay for the charging that I get out of my garage because it's on a separate meter and the apartment complex pays for that usage. So I do not pay anything for
yeah.
charging my car generally.
So I'll pitch that to the audience then.
Yes.
Yes.
um, but I've seen anybody I've talked to, I've seen both ways, especially if you live in a smaller house or like a smaller apartment, you might notice like a big jump just because you don't use a lot of energy in the first place. So adding an EV on top of that and you do a decent amount of driving, it could definitely go up. But I've also seen it the other way. If you live in a big house and you're spending $300 or $400 a month on electricity, if you've got a big house, like an extra 40 or 50 is probably what you see in a month to month variance anyway. So like it might just be a little bit more some months. So I've seen it both ways. Some people don't even notice. Others are like, oh yeah, it like doubled because I've got a small condo or something. So
Yeah. 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 I know for us with being homeowners, like at least before we like started working from home, I was driving about like 100 miles a day, and I would charge the Bolt probably maybe 3 to 4 times a week depending, and immediately we noticed our bill went up about $30
mm,
just for the Bolt. And that was obviously before we started working from home. So it wasn't bad at
yeah,
all. Like it wasn't like a massive jump. It went up. Our electricity bill went up to like $100 to $120 a month,
right.
and before it was only like $80.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So definitely an increase, but I think the major thing is like compared to what you might spend on gas, that's really where the savings are.
yes,
That's the thing. Because I'll kind of walk through the numbers here, but um prior to getting an EV, I was spending $200+ a month on gas, depending on how much I drove and everything. So it really can add up a lot, especially right now with gas over $4 a gallon. So
yes,
I would have
yep,
been spending even more.
yeah.
So
Well,
I'm glad I'm at an EV now.
well, I witnessed that in Arizona. I mean,
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
there was one time I filled up. It was $6.50 a gallon. It was if to go from I think it was like a fourth a tank to a full tank. It was like $85 to $90 just
Wow.
for that, and that only gave me about 310 miles of driving range. Yeah,
Dang. That's wild.
yeah. So
Jeez.
definitely right now. I mean, even when gas was like $2.50, like or less than that, there was
Right.
still a big difference in cost of ownership with
Definitely.
having an EV. Yeah.
Definitely.
So I
Interesting.
know you broke down things into details. Do you want to get into your numbers?
Yes, and one thing I forgot to do was kind of track like how many miles I drove to kind of make it a fair comparison to
Hmm,
gas, because obviously it's going to vary if you're driving a lot. So I might do that conversion real quick, and we'll take
yeah.
a quick break. Okay, I've updated my spreadsheet. We've got the totals here. Um, I want you to guess because I at the break I told you I drove 2,400 miles. So what do you think my total dollar number is for charging between? I'll give you a hint too. I had 5 supercharging sessions, and I charged at home every other day.
Are there oranges involved in this story question?
Alex has 8 oranges.
Yeah, right.
He gives 3 to his friend.
And then charged for 30 minutes. I'm gonna guess like hmm, I'm gonna say like maybe $200.
It's a lot less.
It's a lot less. Okay, well
Mhm.
then clearly I'm failing this episode. I'm gonna say like $125.
Oh, you're very close. Okay, so the total is $120.78.
Nice.
So yeah, that was a good second guess there. Good adjustment.
Yeah.
So like I said just 5 minutes ago, I don't pay for charging in my garage. So basically, what I did is I looked at my utility bill and calculated my cost per kilowatt hour. So we really need to do an episode on like what all these power terms mean, because it kind of does make sense when you're talking about like costs and trying to do all the math here. Um, but kilowatt hours are essentially like how much energy you use to charge your car. Um, that's what you see on your utility bill. You usually see like kilowatt hours used, or like usage is usually in kilowatt hours. So essentially how much energy you used or how much electricity you used. So between um, between everything and averaging it out across the month of April, my cost per kilowatt hours was 14.8 cents per kilowatt hour. So seems really low, but like when you start adding things up,
Yeah.
obviously it gets a little higher. And I think the US average for cost per kilowatt hour is around 13 and a half cents. So I'm like a
Hmm.
little bit above average. But just for home charging, I or I didn't. I guess I didn't give my total miles either. So let me do that first. So I said I drove a little bit over 2,400 miles. So total cost was $120.78, and that was to drive 2,484 miles. So got
Wow.
a lot out of that. Obviously, those $120 like took me a long way. I'm trying to think, equate that to like filling up your tank like for gas, because you're probably going to need like what, 6 fill-ups maybe on a gas car at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, I
So I
would say
mean,
so. Like, I mean, say for example, if you get 350 or 350 miles on a full tank, like just
yeah,
on average, that's 7.1.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I mean, a tank's running probably between 80 some dollars, or if not more, depending on how efficient your car is.
Yeah.
So
So, and on average, I would say most gas tanks are probably about 15 to 16 gallons.
that's fair. Yeah, I'm
So
doing the
that's
math here.
106.5 gallons of gas times like 380 is on average is what we're
Yeah,
seeing
that's
for
what
gas
I was seeing,
prices.
around 380 to 4 today.
My math failed. It said about, well, actually, no, it did not. $404 to go that distance that you went in your Model 3.
Okay, that seems about right.
I thought it would be like 4,000. As everybody can tell, I'm not good at math.
Yeah, so obviously, like we don't have gas cars, so we can't necessarily compare, but you can kind of do the math if you own a gas car and kind of figure out that cost to fill up your tank and equate things. But this is definitely a high like driving month for us. We drove, I think, every weekend. We drove somewhere. Did a lot of supercharging, 5 supercharging sessions. I really only supercharge if we are traveling anymore because we've got the home charging now. So supercharging alone, this was interesting. So supercharging, at least all the places I stopped, charged per kilowatt hour. Some of the superchargers I think are doing per minute still in some states. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, it
Okay.
just depends on the state.
Yeah, it just depends on the state, but all the ones I had been to were um, dollars per kilowatt hour. So they averaged, or I guess the low end was 25 cents per kilowatt hour. So already that's like 10 cents above what I pay at home. And that went all the way up to $36 or 36 cents per kilowatt hour on the high end. So like over double what I spend what I spend at home. So
Wow.
with this fast charging, I know like a lot of articles will try to compare like cost of charging to cost of gas, and they'll use the supercharging costs, which is like not a fair comparison at all, I feel like, because that's not where you're
Yeah.
charging most of the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um but that is something to keep in mind, that you probably are going to spend more if you are supercharging. You're kind of paying for that convenience versus paying for the fuel at that point, or the energy at that point. So that's something to keep in mind. But between those 5 supercharging sessions, I spent $57, 56.99. So
Wow.
not too bad. A little over $10 on average a supercharging session. So
And
not terrible.
just curious, like per session, how many miles of range did that add to your car?
Anywhere from 100 to a little over 200,
Okay.
depending on the stop. So like to fill up, like I think it looks like this first stop was like 25% to like basically 3/4 of a tank, if you will, of my
Yeah.
battery was $18. But then I also had like a quick one to add around 100 miles, and it was under $8. So really depends on how much you need to charge up, I think, and how quick you want to stop. So
Yep.
it varies a ton.
Yeah. I know so we haven't had our car as long as you've had yours, and we got a chance to do a supercharging session going from about like 22%, 25% to about 80%. Added about 200 miles, and I did the math while I was sitting there based on the price of fuel at the sheets I was sitting at, and it was like 365 a gallon. I found out that the amount of range I added to our Model 3 would have been the equivalent of a vehicle getting 54 miles to the gallon.
On a cost basis, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, to get about 200, I think like 15 miles to be exact, it only costs about $16
Gotcha.
to, supercharge. And it was about a $26 to $30 fill up for a 53 mile per gallon equivalent vehicle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good way to look at it too, because you're like buying an EV cost wise, like for fuel is kind of the equivalent of buying like a 54 mile per gallon hybrid, if you think about it that way, like a super efficient gas car. So it really is just like far and above what what anything is going to get out of any gas car is going to get out of the energy that you put in. So
Yep. And
um, I was
before,
gonna. S-
okay.
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Alex. No, go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna show the home charging cost too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted
So
to talk about mine.
supercharging total was 760 miles, but like I said, a majority of that charging was done at home, and I added around 1,700 miles home charging, and I spent a little under $64. So
Wow.
supercharging, if you remember, was $57. Home charging was a little under $64, and I added about 1,000 miles more home charging. If that like helps illustrate how much cheaper it is. So,
That's awesome.
which again, I kind of wanted to give the tip here, like of why you don't want to spend so much time at supercharging stations. You really only want to fill up enough to get home because electricity is cheaper at home and you're spending less time on the road. So
Yep.
that's generally what I do when I'm on trips is I only really stop as long as I need to. If I know I've got enough charge to get home, if I arrive with 15%, it doesn't matter. I'm probably plugging in and going to bed anyway because I've had a long day of driving.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
right. But yeah, I think that's it for my spreadsheet.
Well, that's impressive. Yeah, it's funny, like the more you break down like the cost difference of what it takes to drive a gas car, especially right now with how high gas prices are, if you can afford an EV that fits what you need it to, like it just makes sense. Like you
Right.
save so much more money on fueling up your car.
Yeah.
I know for us, whenever we charge at home, all of our EVs in the past, we've never stopped below 10% unless we like get home with less than 10%. And
Mm,
we always charge to 80% unless we need to charge to 100%. So typically we're doing about like 20 to 80%. And for example, with our Model 3, we typically add anywhere between 40 to 50 kilowatt hours overnight. And that's
okay.
about $6 at a electricity rate of 13 cents per kilowatt hour here in Cleveland.
Gotcha.
So that adds about 200 plus miles of range for about $6.50. Less than a cup of cold foam cold brew at Starbucks. Like, as I know personally.
Depends on how fancy of a drink you get.
Yes, yes. I mean, if you like black coffee, I like the fancy sugared stuff, but
It's funny.
But yeah, I mean, like if you really think of it that way, I know when the Volt first came out back in like 2011, they always compared that you could charge your vehicle for less than the price of coffee, like a cup of coffee.
Mm,
And I mean, we're charging for about $6 every charge
yeah.
here at our house. Um,
I was gonna say I don't think I broke it down kind of day by day, but like when Mallory drives to work and back, it's on average around like 250 per day to like recoup that charging. So that literally is like cheaper than the price of a cup of coffee
right.
to drive to work and back every day. And she doesn't
Yep.
have like that long of a commute. So
Yeah. Yeah, it really is amazing, especially when you kind of break it down to terms where you can like understand it, what it's compared to.
yeah,
Like, yeah, like you can get over 200 miles for that cup of coffee that you're going to go buy the next day.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty impressive.
So on the topic of public charging, one of the questions that I receive a lot is how expensive is public charging? And the thing with the EV industry is that the different networks have different pricing structures. Some of them offer memberships where you can get cheaper charging rates. Others, the site host sets the pricing. So before we kind of get like into the details of like the different networks and stuff like that, Alex, with your professional background with Shell Recharge, can you kind of give us like some more information of how like you're seeing pricing structured?
I've seen it all over the place, to be honest. um,
Same here.
um, it's funny because I've been trying to write like kind of some more like professional articles for LinkedIn and stuff. So I like actually was kind of brainstorming this the other day. I worked the election on Tuesday, so I had a lot of downtime and basically brought my notebook to jot some of these notes down. So this is a timely topic.
Yeah.
Um,
Did not plan this.
yeah, it worked out well. So yeah, so cost of public charging is kind of a double-edged sword. It kind of depends on what your goal with it is too, I think. If your goal with it is to provide a community amenity, if it's to attract customers, if it's really to like appear green or like any of that stuff, really like the best bet is either making charging free or just making electric or making it cost a little bit more than the price of electricity in the area. So like I gave the example of my electricity costs around 14 cents a kilowatt hour. So maybe like you call it 20 cents a kilowatt hour for people that are coming to charge. Just add a little bit of margin on there to cover some of your other costs and stuff, but nothing crazy. Like it's not going to be a big money maker. Um, and the reality is like I don't know if charging ever is actually selling electrons and selling charging is going to be a big money maker. The profit is going to come from the customer acquisition. They come in the convenience store and spend money on snacks. Like that really is the money maker. And that's the way gas works too. Like gas stations don't make a ton of money on charging. So it's really it really is kind of dependent on the situation. But I think like free is always great if that is kind of your goal, is to appear green, provide a community amenity, especially with like level 2 stuff too, because people are usually parking for the day and that sort of thing. Um, but you can also make the argument that if you make it free, then any EV that comes in might plug in there whether they need to charge or not, which is probably an argument against making it free, which I've kind of gone both ways on it. I love free charging stations, but I also realize like if there's a free charging station, might abuse that and might plug in if they don't necessarily need to charge.
Yeah.
Which we
Yeah.
kind of brought up on our EV etiquette episode, right? I
Yep.
mean,
Yeah. If you don't need to charge, don't take the space.
yeah.
Yeah.
So and with free charging, it's very easy to say, oh, I need to charge, or like I have an EV, so this is a preferred space for me. So making it cost at least something will deter those people and kind of save that space for people that actually do need to charge and are happy spending the money to plug in. That's definitely the case for L2s on the fast charging side of thing. I think you definitely need to pay something, especially because it is like meant to be fast and people plug in and are only there for a little bit and then leave. So I think I think that definitely needs to be paid so you don't run into that same issue that people are just coming up for the free charging.
Yeah.
And I think adding I know a lot of non-Tesla charging stations have connection fees as well, where you have to pay like $1 or $2 up front to even plug in. So that kind of deters people from taking up the spot if they don't need to charge as well.
Yeah.
Where it's
Yep.
like, okay, I know I got to be here for 30 minutes, so I don't mind paying that extra $2 because that's kind of negligible after I'm finishing my charging session. So I think that's something to consider as well. And then the idle fees as well are crucial because
Yeah.
even if you have free charging, if somebody is sitting there plugged in and not actively charging, it's probably a good idea to charge them something for taking up that spot, and they probably need to move their car at that point, and that money is a motivator. So it'll if you get a notification on your phone like, hey, your car's done charging, you're going to get dinged with a $15 idle fee in the next 10 minutes if you don't move your car. That'll probably get somebody to move their car. So
yes. Yep. Exactly.
So it sounds like a lot of like extra fees and stuff, but it is really all about kind of making it more controlled and not like kind of influencing EV drivers in a way that's kind of monetary versus saying like, oh, we're limiting the charging station to only a 30-minute like charge. Like we're just going to shut it off after 30 minutes. Cause that's like, what if somebody does need to charge extra and like wants to pay that extra for that convenience? I feel like you should have the freedom to do that. So,
Yeah.
that's kind of my thoughts on that. I was kind of all over the place, but I
Yeah,
figured
no, I
that's
mean,
kind of
yeah,
a good initial discussion there.
yeah, no, I mean it makes sense, and the tough thing is that like all the different charging networks obviously offer different pricing structures,
Yes.
and
Yes.
and the thing too that a lot of people have to remember when they're shopping EVs is that a lot of the new EVs actually offer complimentary charging at specific
Mm,
charging networks. So,
yeah.
for example, like the Hyundai Ioniq 5, you can get 30 minutes of unlimited free charging for, I believe, 2 years at Electrify America stations.
Yep.
Whereas the Toyota BZ4X, you get complimentary charging at EVgo stations.
Mm,
So, that's one thing to keep in mind too. And the other thing to keep in mind is the monthly membership programs that you can participate in.
mm,
For example, like Electrify America, you can get their monthly membership where it's $4 a month, and they remove the session fee, which you mentioned, like the dollar
mm,
session fee, or
yeah.
sometimes it's
So
a
if you know you're
different
going to be
cost.
charging a lot, it's probably worth it to get that.
Yes, yeah, and then they discount the charging rate, like the
Okay.
cost slightly. I mean, it's not like a massive discount, but
Right.
they do discount it by a few cents.
Gotcha.
And then another example, the West Coast Electric Highway, they're being replaced by a network called EVCS, which I
Mm,
think literally just stands for Electric Vehicle Charging Systems, EVCS. You
okay.
can pay a monthly subscription. It's like $50 a month for unlimited free fast charging at their stations.
But only at those stations, right?
Correct, only at
Okay.
those stations. So that's kind of where like as you're doing research and you're trying to figure out the cost, you kind of have to remember that these networks do offer benefits.
Yeah.
You just might have to pay into them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's all over the place too. I mean, every network does it slightly different. It's very
Yep.
much like we're still very much in the Wild West. I don't think anybody's like fully figured this out yet. And Tesla's a rare case too. I feel like they've got the best charging experience. They've got like the easiest to use network, in my opinion. They make it real easy to pay for charging, but they've also made it clear like we're not making money on this. Like this is basically to recoup the cost of installing the chargers and then
Yes. Yeah.
keeping up with them as well. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's all over the place right now.
Yes. Yeah. I definitely think it is like a case by case basis too, especially for like charge point stations, for example, where the
Yeah.
site host determines the price. Like
Mm, yeah.
there's a brand new Green Level 2 down the street, and it's brand new. It's $4.95 an hour,
Oh my
almost
gosh.
$5 an hour. And
Jeez.
like when I see stuff like that, that's a clear sign that they're just literally trying to recoup any money they put into that install.
Yeah.
But like the station down the street, which is only about 15 cents per kilowatt hour, it's busy. Like I've never
Yeah.
seen anybody at this new station because everybody's at the one down the street. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's where that kind of influencing driver behavior with those fees and stuff can swing the wrong way too. Because if you're,
Yes.
that is a good thing I always do with all our customers is I kind of look in the area. I see like what are other networks charging. If you're putting in a fast charger, does it charge faster? Can we charge a little bit more, or is it a little bit slower than the ones around there? And can we charge less? And that's a great example of that because like why would you plug in for $5 an hour if you can drive a block down the street and pay significantly less money? So
Yeah. Yeah. And to put that into charging terms, that charger is rated for about 25 miles per hour of charge.
yeah,
So like you're paying $5 for 25 miles of driving range. Like,
yeah, no thanks.
yeah. At that point, yeah, the gas is cheaper in that example. But
Right.
yeah, I just couldn't believe that. Well, it's good to hear that like there's some analysis done in comparing to like what other chargers and like how that charging station can impact your charging because I think it's important. Like I kind of wish that like the other networks would do stuff like that,
Definitely.
or at least offered some type of flat rate, like how you see at Electrify America and EVgo
Yes.
stations. Yeah.
And that's something I see on a consistent basis because a lot of people installing EV charging, there's nothing wrong with this, but a lot of people are new to it. They have no idea what like is a right price to charge, and I'm sure that is not malicious that they're charging the $5 per hour to charge. That they just might not know. Like that's
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
that's
that's
just
true.
might be the situation.
Yeah.
So I think that's something I think the whole EV industry needs to do a lot better is educating customers on that want to install charging. what is a suggested cost? What is a good cost? What is a bad cost? What can we do with all these fees? Like,
Yep.
help them understand the pricing a little bit better, so and understand it from the driver perspective as well. Because
Yeah.
that's like, I'm sure if you explain to the people with the $5 an hour charger that, hey, like, you're way overcharging and that's why nobody's using your charger, they would
Yep.
probably adjust their fees. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been told to reach out to them, but I mean it's literally only like 2 to 3 weeks old. So
mm,
like every time we drive by it, I'm like keeping an eye on it. But yeah, I've never seen anybody use it yet. So
right. And
yeah.
it's funny too, because the town I live in just put in a bunch of level 2 chargers at like parks, at the rec center, like all these different places. And I went to use it because it was public at the time. I plugged in, it said free charging. I like tweeted at the town and stuff to say like, hey, thanks for installing this. And somebody asked how much it was, and I said it was free. And the town replied and was like, this shouldn't be free. It should be like 8 cents a kilowatt hour. And I was like, that's not what the app says. So,
Right.
so
Yeah.
I think in a lot of these cases, people assume that like, oh, it's been taken care of, but they don't always follow up or don't have an EV to even go test and check it out to see if that pricing is correct. So that happens all the time. Or it could get fat fingered too and like plugged in wrong with the wrong
Yeah.
charging fee.
Yeah.
So
So maybe that wasn't supposed to be 4.95 an hour. Maybe it's supposed to be
yeah,
49 cents
0.495.
or something.
Yeah,
Right.
you never know. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's you hit it right on the head. Like we're still kind of like in the Wild West when it comes to the charging aspect of EVs. And I think until there becomes some type of standard and not like regulation, like I just think that we're gonna keep seeing this different price difference. But
yeah.
I mean, but at the same time, the majority of public charging stations are going to be cheaper, if not significantly cheaper, than fueling up a vehicle with gas.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of a general statement, but it is kind of what
Yeah.
my
And I
personal
think
experience has been.
and I think the market will kind of work itself out too, not to get too like economic, but like
Yeah.
the reason one random gas station isn't charging $6 a gallon when the one down the street is charging like 380 is because of that exact reason. Like, it's a lot more visible to consumers and they realize like, why would I go to that station that's a block away, that gas station that's a block away, when
Yeah.
when I can get it for way cheaper right here. So I think once that
Yep.
is more visible and there's more EV drivers on the road, it'll all kind of work itself out.
Oh yeah, for sure. Definitely. Well, I'm trying to what time? Okay, we've been 42 minutes.
Oh,
Um,
another note I had here that I forgot to bring up is the good thing about pricing is you can change it. Like, it's not set in stone after you install the charger. And a lot of times with these smart and network chargers, you can do variable pricing as well to even control driver behavior even more. So if you've got, especially in places where electricity is way more expensive during the day because of demand charges or whatever else, a lot of times whatever network is operating the station, or if you've got a software platform you've bought from somebody, usually you can control those and schedule the charging fees as well, which is not something I don't think gas can do right now,
eh,
at least easily.
yeah,
We could literally change it by the hour with like our stations if we wanted to. Or you could say like, all right, when it hits 2:30, the price goes up to this because demand charges are higher, and then it goes back down at 7 p.m. because demand charges are lower. So you
yeah,
can do all that stuff. And then also, a good idea would be, if you're like are kind of initially putting it out there as a customer acquisition thing, you can make it free at first. And then if it starts getting crowded, people are abusing the free charger and like utilization is too high, you can start charging some fees for that to kind of deter people from using it. So
yeah,
there's just so many options with pricing, and I think that overwhelms people too, because it's not just A or B.
yeah.
There's so many
Yeah.
options.
Well, I mean, you brought up a really interesting point. Like, it's actually something I've never thought about. When it comes to gas prices, a lot of that's out of people's control.
Right.
Like, obviously, the gas station. I mean, like, I don't know too much about how like gas prices are set, but I know there's so many outside factors to that.
Yeah.
Obviously, what we're seeing right now. But when it comes to electricity, I think a lot of people are just like, oh, I can control that. Like, I can control that cost.
Yeah.
Which that would, I mean, that kind of like, I was like, oh my God, you're right. Like, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, and I
It's,
mean, you're still paying you're still paying your utility for the charging cost, or for the electricity cost to charge vehicles, and then usually whoever's operating the charger will then pay you back for any usage. I think that's typically how it works. Um, the other thing I wanted to bring up, because I mean, I used to work at a utility, so I kind of know that side of it as well with electricity.
mhm.
The great thing about electricity is it is significantly less volatile than gas prices. I mean, the price of a barrel of oil changes like every 15 minutes or something, right?
Yep.
Like it's crazy how it's like the stock. It's going up and down and it's all over the place, which can be kind of bad if you're budgeting too, because like what if gas shoots up and now you're paying $400 a month instead of $200 a month on gas? Like if you've got a tight budget already, like that can cause some
Y-
issues.
Yeah, for sure.
um, but with electricity, the nice thing is um, it's generally a pretty set rate. And then if a utility wants to raise rates or adjust rates, they have to get that approved by PUCO. I'm pretty sure it is the Public Utility Commission. Um, Basically, utilities have to say, okay, we want to raise rates to X amount, and here's the investments we're going to make with it and why this raise is justified. So in like a regulated utility, they can't just suddenly raise rates to like I pay close to 15 cents a kilowatt hour. They can't just like all of a sudden, oh, we've decided it's 30 cents now for electricity. They
Yeah.
have to go get that approved. They have to say, okay, we're raising it for this reason, this reason, this reason. We've got to make significant investments to like improve our infrastructure or whatever. So this rate case or this rate change is justified. So
Interesting.
all of that like plays into it a lot, and that's why like your electricity isn't fluctuating all the time. It really only fluctuates based on usage, why you see that kind of month to month change.
So, follow up question for you, because this is another misconception with EVs, is
Yeah,
that a lot of people think that like the grid can't handle, like an absorbent amount of electric vehicles
yeah.
charging. So, to kind of spin off of that question, do you think utilities are going to increase prices of electricity the more EVs get on the grid?
It's a good question. We could go about it a few ways, and I feel like this deserves its own episode too, of like, can the grid handle EVs? Because it is a complicated question. Um, the simple answer is yes, it can. And there's a couple reasons for that. Like the issues with significant load on the grid, there's issues when there's swings in the load. So, like, if you've got this huge increase all of a sudden, or you've got this huge drop off all of a sudden,
Hmm.
that causes issues. Um, and then you've also got that peak load as well. So, like, we've got obviously a peak load that all our generators can match and like can hit. But then if we go above that, that's what happened like in Texas when all that stuff started clicking off, because they literally like they ran out of they ran out of capacity. They couldn't generate any more electricity. So that's why you start having those blackouts and start having issues with that, is when the grid is truly like overloaded. So there's a couple ways to kind of compensate for that. The best way, which kind of relates back to pricing, is my challenge or my request for utilities is to pass like EV specific rates that have lower cost charging overnight, so that we don't have those big swings in electricity and we never go above that peak load. So like if you looked at like a load graph of electricity usage throughout the day, like it kind of gets higher in the evening as people are coming home, then it drops off when everybody goes to bed. So we're overnight we're really not in any worry of hitting that peak load, right?
Yeah.
Because most stuff is
Yeah.
off. It's dark outside. Like most people are asleep, which is an excellent opportunity for EV charging because we've got all that extra grid capacity that we could use to charge EVs. So what I would love for utilities to do is say, okay, we're going to make charging or electricity significantly cheaper overnight, so that if you start charging your EV at 10 p.m. instead of when you plug it like when you get home, that saves us the utility a lot of headache of trying to upgrade stuff, and it
Yeah.
also like saves
Yeah.
you a headache because it's cheaper to charge overnight. So it's kind of a win-win there, and can influence people to charge EVs later at night instead of like right when they get home. So
Yeah,
A lot of
I
ways to go
definitely.
about it.
I was gonna say I definitely think that deserves a more in-depth episode,
Yeah.
like getting more into the nitty-gritty about it.
Yeah, and that's my
Yeah.
retired utility opinion. I didn't even work on that side of utilities. I was like in engineering, so I didn't really get into that. I just kind of had a high level understanding of it. But I think that'd be cool to have like a utility expert person on here to really dive into that stuff because
Yeah,
that'd be really
yeah,
fun.
definitely. Well, if anybody's listening who has that expertise, let us know because we'd love to
Definitely.
have you on the show.
We've had a couple of people reach out about being on the podcast, and we're definitely like open to anybody. If you've got a a good EV related topic or something you feel like you can bring a better voice to than we can because we're not experts on everything,
Yeah.
like we're definitely
Nope.
open to that.
Definitely not math. Not me. Not me. You much better, but yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, I put a whole spreadsheet together for this episode.
Yes. Yeah, no, I just did not. But as we wrap up this episode, I know that we ask a lot of questions, and I think we should do a story question for our next Spotify post.
Okay.
Deals with oranges, how many oranges you'll have, how many cars you'll charge, all that stuff.
Solve the math problem, you get a prize.
Yes, exactly.
All right, I think that'll be it for this episode. If you got anything else to add to the conversation, as always, drop a comment below or reach out to us on social media. Love to hear from you. So thanks for listening.
And living the electric life.
Yes.
Yes, I got that in.